This is the screencast for the second try it in Lesson 23b of Stephen's C# 24-hour trainer. In this try it, we get to build a bank account class that is going to raise an event if there are insufficient funds to perform a debit. So this is the program I wrote to test the class, and that's about all I've done so far. There's no code behind it. Let's create our bank account class. So I'll call it bank account. And we need to give it a couple properties. I'm going to, actually it only needs one property. It's going to be a decimal property because it's currency. We're going to call it balance, and it can be auto-implemented. So that part is easy. The tricky part is creating this event that we're going to raise if there's a problem. And it's tricky because there's several steps we need to perform. We need to define the event arguments that the event handler is going to receive. We need to define the delegate that defines the kind of event handler that can catch this event. And then we need to actually raise the event. So let's start by creating our overdrawn event args class. So I'm going to say public class overdrawn event args. See if I can spell it correctly. And it's going to have two public fields. We could make these properties if we wanted to, but I'm just going to make them fields. So they're going to be public decimal current balance and invalid balance. So this is the balance the customer currently has. This is the balance the customer would have if this transaction were to continue. And we're not going to let it continue, but the program could use this information to tell the customer or the user what's going on. All right, so there's our event args class. Now let's define the delegate. So it's going to be public delegate, and then we want a signature of the event handler that we're going to use here. So it's going to be void. It's not going to return anything meaningful. I'm going to call it overdrawn event handler. And it's going to take two parameters. This is a standard signature used by most event handlers. It's not required, but a lot of developers follow this same format just to be consistent with what Microsoft does, how the controls behave, and so forth. So the first parameter is an object named sender. This is going to be the object raising the event. For this class, it's going to be the bank account object that is overdrawn. And then the next parameter is going to be an overdrawn event args parameter, which I'm going to call args. So that defines our delegate. All right, finally we need to define the event itself. This says that this class is allowed to raise this event. It's going to be public event, and now the name of the event, the name of the event handler, the delegate that can catch this thing. So it's overdrawn event handler, and then now finally the name of the event, overdrawn. So what this says is we are going to raise an overdrawn event, and the thing that must catch it is an overdrawn event handler. All right, so we're almost there. This defines the event setup. Now down here, we're going to create our two methods. There's going to be a credit method and the debit method. Credit is pretty easy. Public void credit, and it's going to take as parameter an amount. And all it's going to do is add that amount to our balance. So it's going to say balance plus equals amount. That's easy. There's no error checking required there. You could add some to make sure the amount is sane, make sure it's not like $100 trillion, but that's not strictly necessary. So now let's write the debit method. That one's a little trickier. So public void debit. It also will take a decimal parameter. That's the amount that we're going to remove from this account. But it needs to do some checking. If the balance is less than the amount, then we can't go ahead with this transaction. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise our overdrawn event. Before we do that, however, we need to see if there's anybody listening for that event. If the code isn't listening for it, we don't want to raise the event. So we say if overdrawn is not equal to null. What that means is there are some pieces of code out there who have registered to receive this event. And in that case, we're going to create a new overdrawn event args. Oops, what has it done to me here? Overdrawn event args, we'll call it args, and it's going to equal a new overdrawn event args object. We're going to set args.sender, args.current balance equal to the account's current balance. And we're going to set args.invalid balance equal to what we would get if we were to continue the transaction. So that would be balance minus amount. And then finally, we raise the overdrawn event here, passing it this first parameter sender, which is this. It's the object that is raising the event, and then the arguments. Okay. Meanwhile, back out here, if the balance is less than the amount, we do all this, we raise the event. Else, we have sufficient funds, so we simply say balance minus equals amount. And that's all there is to the class. So let's go back over to the form, check the credit button. Now, and let me make the stub for the debit button as well. Both of these event handlers need to deal with the same account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create it out here as a field. So I'm going to say bank account, my account, equals new bank account. And when the form loads, let's give the bank account some money. So I'm going to say my account dot balance equals $100. I also want to be able to catch events for this account. So I need to write an event handler. So let's do that now. So private void, I'm going to call this my account overdrawn. It needs to take the same parameters as the delegate that we defined in the class. So the first one is going to be an object called sender. The second one is going to be a bank account dot overdrawn event args argument. It's defined in the bank account class, so we need to say bank account dot overdrawn event args. I'll call it args. And then in here, I'm just going to display a message box telling the user we can't do it. So message box dot show insufficient funds. All right, so now we have a method that could accept an overdrawn event. Let's go back up to the form's load event handler and register it. So I'm going to say my account dot overdrawn plus equals my account underscore overdrawn. So what that does is says that for this object's overdrawn event, I want this routine to be called. All right, and then finally, just getting going here, on the main form we have a text box that shows the account's current balance. Let's display the current balance there. So this is going to be the balance text box dot text equals my account dot balance, lowercase my account dot balance dot toString formatted as currency. All right, so now we're up and running. We're ready to build code for these buttons. The credit button is pretty easy. We just say my account dot credit, and then we give it the value that the user has entered in the text box. Well, what is that? We need to parse it. So it's decimal dot parse amount text box dot text, and I'm going to pass in the number styles. Oh, looks like I don't have that namespace in here. So let me add system dot globalization to my namespaces up there, my using statements, and now I can say number styles dot any. So this will be able to parse currency values. So what this statement says is take whatever's in that text box, parse it, use this number styles to allow you to have dollar signs and pound symbols, and then call the credit method for this account so we credit that amount. Let's do the same thing with the debit button, except I'm going to change this to the debit method. And that's all there is to it. Let's run the program and see if it works. So initially in the form's load event handler, it created the account and put in $100. So we start with an initial balance of $100. Let me credit another $100 to the account. Oh, and we forgot to display the new balance. So let me do that. Let me just copy this text up to here and here. So after we do a credit or a debit, we display the new balance. Let me try again. We start with $100. I credit another 100, so our balance is now 200. If I debit to remove $100, it goes down to $100. If I do another debit of $150, that would make our balance go below zero. I get the insufficient funds message. So what happened was the bank account object refused to allow this. It raised its event. I caught the event and displayed this message. Now this is just one way to handle this situation. Another way that might even be more reasonable or more typical, instead of raising an event to tell the main program that the account is overdrawn, you might decide the account being overdrawn is actually an error, in which case we wouldn't raise an event, we would throw an exception. If we did that, we would have to wrap this code where we do the debit inside a try catch block so we can handle that.